So, whatever happened to that strange and mysterious 1970s classic sci-fi film Colossus The Forbin Project? Let's find out. Movies,
Music and monsters.
Hey guys, Dan Monroe here talking about movies, music, and monsters. Oh man, Colossus. No joke, this is one of those comfort movies that I put on probably at least once a month. Not only because it's super cool, but because as a kid, I always secretly knew that deep down, this was really a sequel to Escape from the Planet of the Apes. I mean, how could it not be? Forbin was clearly an Escape from the Planet of the Apes. You see, he didn't really die at the end. He survived and then built Colossus to destroy the apes. Yeah, I know, the two movies aren't related, but that might just give you an insight as to how my mind worked when I was 13.
I never really cared for all those damn dirty apes.
Well, there you go. Way back in 1980, the amazing movie magazine, Sin Fantastic, announced this film, Colossus, The Forbin Project, as the second greatest film of the decade, only immediately following The Exorcist. That, my friends, is one high-ranking movie. You know, it's funny, this has always been one of my personal sci-fi favorite flicks from the 70s, and surprisingly, I have to admit that whenever I mention it to somebody, not too many people know what the heck I'm talking about. I mean, yeah, I guess it wasn't a super big financial blockbuster like Jaws or The Exorcist, but holy cow, how can you call yourself a sci-fi fan if you've never seen Colossus? At any rate, there really isn't a lot of information out there about this classic sci-fi film, so I had to do a lot of deep digging to find out whatever I could to bring it to you guys. So, grab hold of your world-dominating computer and let's dive in. For those of you who maybe haven't seen the film, briefly, Colossus The Forbin Project, which was originally released as just The Forbin Project, came out in 1970 and was directed by Joseph Sargent, with the ultra-cool Eric Braeden in the lead role of Dr. Charles Forbin. He basically, in good faith, builds a computer designed to take the emotions and decisions about warfare away from us lowly humans and put it in the hands of a critical thinking, logical supercomputer that would hopefully have the welfare of human beings as its top priority. Well, let's just say that things didn't go exactly as planned, as Colossus discovers a nearly identical second system named Guardian, built by the Russians, that together enslave humanity and take over the world.
It was actually much easier than I thought.
Yes, I'm sure it was. And no, we're not there yet, but doesn't that make AI sound just that much more wonderful?
Frankly, I think AI sounds like a wonderful idea.
Yeah, you would. The film was based on a novel by D.F. Jones, simply called Colossus. D.F. Jones actually worked with real computers in Britain during World War II, and get this, he actually knew about a real-world computer named Colossus, which was at the heart of Britain's code-breaking complex at Bletchley Park. There you see, Colossus was real. Now, as far as the production history of the film goes, early on, believe it or not, the studio wanted either Gregory Peck or Charlton Heston to play the lead role. But the producer, Stanley Chase, really insisted that he wanted a relatively unknown actor to play the part of Charles Forbin. So that's where Eric Braeden came into the picture.
I got a call. Could I quickly fly to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, and do a screen test at Universal Studios for a film called Colossus The Forbin Project? And I remember the call came in, said Lou Wasserman loved the test, wants you to play the lead in the picture. And we did it on stage 12 at Universal Studios. And when you suddenly star in a film, things change very quickly. And then I did Colossus. That's arguably the most pivotal moments of my career.
This is bizarre, but Eric Braeden's birth name was, and I know I'm going to slaughter this, Hans Gudegast. And that was the name he was currently using at the time while trying to break into Hollywood. One of the studio executives from Universal let him know in no uncertain terms that nobody would be allowed to star in an American film if they had a German name. Wow, like, really? Fricking studio executives! Anyway, it was at this point that Hans Gudegast instantly became Eric Braeden.
Then began the search for a name. So I took the first part of the village I came from in Germany called Bredenbeek, Braden. And Eric is a Northern European name, could be British, could be anything. And it was Wasserman, they liked it, and they said, okay. But I felt very strange about it for a long time.
And wow, did this guy have a huge role in soap operas. Now that Eric Braeden was hired to play the lead, that allowed Gregory Peck to star in I Walk the Line and Charlton Heston to take his contractually obligated supporting role in Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Eric Braeden was just perfect as Charles Forbin. He was just so scientifically calm, cool, and collected. I always thought he would have made a really good James Bond. The film also featured a love interest with Susan Clark, and anything that William Schallert co-stars in is guaranteed to be a good time. And the guy who played the president? Awesome. Very presidential. But I was really surprised, like later in life, to learn that, and don't tell anyone, but Richie's mother from Happy Days helped to build Colossus. Yep, even Marion Ross had a pretty cool part. Gotta love that. This is really interesting. There was a very young filmmaker on set almost every single day of production, observing, and his name was Steven Spielberg. You know, one thing I always really thought was really awesome about this film was how unbelievably realistic that some of the sets were and some of the computers were. Well, little did I know at the time, but that's exactly what some of them really were. Real computers. Apparently, when the head executives over at a company called Controlled Data Corporation, or CDC, found out that Universal Studios was planning a major motion picture featuring a computer, well, they saw their chance for some free public exposure, and they agreed to supply, free of charge, tons of real computer equipment and the technicians to oversee and maintain the systems during filming. I mean, talk about a colossal streak of good luck. See what I did there? Colossal.
Don't quit your day job.
That giant outdoor Colossus control center was actually filmed at the Lawrence Hall of Science Museum at the University of California in Berkeley. And even though this film really had a relatively low budget for the time, surprisingly, all the scenes that took place in Rome were actually filmed in Rome. And then, near the end of the film, Colossus demands that Forbin create a voice for the supercomputer. And this is super cool. A while back, I did a deep dive into the history of the 1953 version of The War of the Worlds and talked about a voice artist named Paul Frees who did one of the opening narrations for the film. Well, I just recently discovered that not only is he the voice of the ghost host at the Disney Parks Haunted Mansion, but get this, he was also uncredited the voice of Colossus.
And it was an awesome voice.
I mean, come on, how cool is that?
Super cool.
The soundtrack to this film by Michael Colomber was really, really strange, with a lot of odd uses of pizzicato strings with a cold and almost computer-like emotionless score. But it's a great soundtrack to play during the Halloween season. Well, the originally titled The Forbin Project premiered on April 4th, 1970 at Cinema Rendezvous in New York City, and not surprisingly, only grossed a little over $7,000 in its opening week. I'm not really sure why, but I can tell you one thing, the movie poster certainly left a lot to be desired. Also, and nothing against Eric Braeden, but I think the film might have done better with a major Hollywood star like Charlton Heston in the lead role. Who knows? At any rate, due to its poor box office performance, the film was withdrawn and then re-released 4 months later at the Pickwood Theater in Los Angeles, this time called Colossus The Forbin Project. It then eventually ended up back in New York in October on just under 40 screens, grossing a somewhat disappointing $150,000, ranking 7th at the U.S. box office. And in total, the film only pulled in around $300,000. That's a little shabby even for 1970. But don't let it get you down. This film was freaking awesome and still is.
Mostly because of me, obviously.
Now, critically, at least for the New York release, Colossus received unanimously great reviews. The New York Times said the film is full of surprising moments of humor and intelligence, an unprecedented science fiction classic which could be considered almost a perfect movie. David Kerr, film critic for the Chicago Reader, also really enjoyed the film, calling it an above-average science fiction extravaganza with a somewhat less than effective ending. Okay, not to do the spoiler alert thing, but spoiler alert, the film does have a pretty down ending.
What do you mean? I won.
Which, you know what, I really appreciated at the time and still do. I mean, why does every movie have to have a glorious, well-rounded happy ending? I mean, if anything, I'd have to say that the ending of this film is probably exactly what would happen if some supercomputer really did take over the world. Now, as far as what happened to a lot of the costumes and props from the film, keep in mind the original computers were returned to CDC, but other than that, I really didn't find anything except one really cool prop. The remote control device that Forbin uses at the beginning of the film to actually activate Colossus does still exist, and here it is. Now, I'm not sure exactly where this is, whether it's on display somewhere or in a private collection, but it is super cool to know that there's at least one part of Colossus that does still exist today. Colossus The Forbin Project was released on DVD in 2004, and finally, a gorgeous, remastered, high-definition, widescreen Blu-ray version of the film was released in February of 2018. But guys, trust me, if you've never seen this film, do yourself a favor and check it out. It's one of the, in my opinion, greatest sci-fi dramas of the 1970s. In fact, if you guys want to watch it like right now, I'm pretty sure you can, because the film, I believe, is in public domain and available at the Internet Archive, link in the description. Well, Colossus came and Colossus went, but that certainly wasn't the end of this amazing sci-fi classic. The original Colossus author, D.F. Jones, wrote an entire trilogy based on this concept. Colossus, The Fall of Colossus, and Colossus and the Crab. crab. Not really sure why Colossus would go after seafood, but who knows? Maybe he wiped all the humans out. The last 2 books were published nearly a decade after the original novel was written, but now I gotta go digging and find those other 2 books so I know what the heck happened to mankind. Sort of interesting, in the movie, one of the attempts by the humans to regain control of Colossus is to try to overload the machine by feeding it too much data. Now, this sequence was only in the movie. It wasn't in the original novel, but when the author saw the film, he put that storyline as a major plot point into the sequel novel, The Fall of Colossus. Now, back in 2007, Imagine Entertainment and Universal Studios confirmed that they were working on a remake titled Colossus to be directed by Ron Howard. Brian Glazer was set to produce. The screenplay, again, was about a government-built supercomputer that becomes sentient and takes over the world, but nothing really happened for a couple of years until October of 2010, when the project moved forward with the announcement that Will Smith would be starring in the lead role. I don't know, maybe. I mean, he was great in Independence Day, but I wasn't really a fan of the I Am Legend remake. But that's what they were going for, and in 2011, Universal announced new writers on the project. Then, in 2013, Universal announced even more writers on the project, and then nothing. That was it. Gone. I don't know. Sounds to me like a big, colossal waste of time. Eh?
Okay, enough already.
This is super cool. Apparently, James Cameron was such a huge fan of this movie, Colossus, that he often stated that this film not only influenced his screenplay for The Terminator in 1984, but was the specific reason why he cast Eric Braeden in the role of John Astor in Titanic. Colossus The Forbin project not only remains near and dear to all of us nerdy sci-fi geeks, but also launched an entire decade of science fiction classics throughout the course of the 70s, like The Incredible Melting Man, Damnation Alley, Future World, The Omega Man, Logan's Run, Soylent Green, Mad Max, The Andromeda Strain, and so many more. We could be here all day, but that, my friends, is the topic of another video. I really hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive into Colossus The Forbin project, and if you did and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole bunch of new videos coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig. As always, if anybody has any questions, drop them down in the comments, and I will try my best to answer them for you. And please feel free to stop back anytime as we continue our conversation on movies,
Music
and monsters.
Movies, music, and monsters.